Even though Portugal and Spain once shared a union, and even though Spain invaded Portugal during the Napoleonic era, the Portuguese lands were never truly conquered or absorbed into the Spanish kingdom. This fact is remarkable because Portugal's only neighbor is Spain, a much larger and once far more powerful nation. Considering Spain's size, armies, and empire, it seems surprising that Portugal managed to remain an independent state on the edge of the Iberian Peninsula. To understand why, we must travel back through centuries of shared history, shaped by conquest, faith, and diplomacy. In ancient times, the Iberian Peninsula was known to the Romans as Hispania. After the fall of Rome, it came under the rule of the Visigoths, a Germanic tribe that established kingdoms across the region. Their control lasted until the early 8th century, when a new power emerged from the Arabian deserts. Islam spread swiftly through North Africa, and in 711, Muslim forces led by Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and invaded the peninsula. Within a few years, most of Hispania was under Muslim control, and the territory became known as Al-Andalus. For centuries, Muslim dynasties ruled much of Iberia, creating a culture that blended Arab, Berber, and local traditions. Along the Atlantic coast, small Christian enclaves survived in the mountains and slowly began to reclaim land in a movement called the Reconquista. One of these Christian counties was Portugal. In the 12th century, a nobleman named Afonso Henriques led a successful campaign to establish his rule. After several victories, he declared himself king in 1139. His kingdom was recognized by the King of Leon in 1143, and later by the Pope in 1179. Portugal's independence was born, and its borders expanded southward until the Reconquista ended in 1249. While Portugal was shaping its destiny, the rest of Iberia was following a different path. Castile and Aragon grew in power until they united through the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella. Their union in the late 15th century formed the foundation of what became Spain. In 1492, the fall of Granada completed the Reconquista, and Spain soon turned its attention across the ocean. That same year, Columbus sailed west, beginning the Spanish Empire, which would stretch across the Americas and beyond. Spain became one of the most powerful nations in the world, ruled by vast wealth from its colonies. Portugal, however, had already been exploring the seas. From the early 1400s, its sailors charted new routes around Africa and toward Asia. In 1498, Vasco da Gama reached India and opened a new age of global trade. In 1494, Spain and Portugal signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, dividing the newly discovered lands between them. Portugal gained Brazil and territories in Africa and Asia, while Spain claimed most of the Americas. The two empires became rivals across the oceans, but rarely fought over their European borders in 1578. Portugal suffered a crisis. King Sebastian died in battle in Morocco without leaving an heir. His successor, King Henry, also died childless, leading to a dispute over succession. The Spanish monarch Philip II had a claim through family ties, and backed by his powerful army, he invaded Portugal. In 1581, he was crowned king of both nations, forming the Iberian Union. For the first time, Spain and Portugal shared a monarch, yet Portugal remained legally distinct, keeping its laws and colonial administration. Many Portuguese resented Spanish rule and felt their independence slipping away. After 60 years under Spanish kings, Portugal revolted. In 1640, the Duke of Braganza led a rebellion that became the Portuguese Restoration War. Despite years of fighting, Spain failed to suppress the uprising. Weakened by wars elsewhere and internal problems, Spain could not hold on to Portugal. By 1668, Spain recognized Portuguese independence, restoring the Braganza dynasty to the throne. This moment permanently separated the two nations and established the border that still exists. Today, in the centuries that followed, Portugal and Spain often found themselves on opposing sides of Europe's great conflicts. Portugal maintained its ancient alliance with England, later Great Britain, while Spain aligned with France. During the 7 Years' War, Spain invaded Portugal in 1762, but the attack failed thanks to British support. In 1801, Spain again invaded during the War of the Oranges and captured the town of Olivenza, yet even then Portugal's independence endured the most serious threat came in 1807. When Napoleon sought to force Portugal into his blockade against Britain, Spain agreed to help the French army invade Portuguese territory. The royal family fled across the Atlantic to Brazil, and for a time it seemed Portugal was lost. But soon Napoleon turned on Spain itself, overthrowing its king and seizing control. The Spanish people rebelled, and Portugal now stood beside them as an ally. With help from the British, they drove out the French armies by 1813 after the brutal Peninsular War. Both countries were left exhausted and impoverished. Their colonies soon began to break away, but the partnership against Napoleon ensured that Portugal's independence survived once more. In the decades that followed, ideas of uniting the Iberian Peninsula occasionally reappeared. Some thinkers in both nations dreamed of an Iberian Republic or a confederation, but such plans never gained real support. Portugal's people had a strong sense of separate identity, formed through centuries of independence, exploration, and trade. They spoke their own language, looked outward to the Atlantic, and maintained ties with Brazil and Britain rather than with their Iberian neighbor. Even during times of Spanish turmoil, such as the First and Second Spanish Republics, when invasion or annexation was considered, Portugal remained untouched. Geography, too, offered protection. Its mountains and hills made invasion costly, while its long Atlantic coast connected it to the wider world. Spain itself was often too divided and distracted to focus on conquering Portugal. Rebellions in Catalonia and the Basque lands, constant wars in Europe, and the challenges of managing vast colonies left little energy for Iberian unification. By the time Spain stabilized as a modern nation in the 19th century, both countries had established firm national identities and recognized borders. Conquest was no longer realistic or desirable. Portugal's lasting alliance with Britain was another vital shield. Whenever Spain attempted to expand, the British Navy and Army intervened, ensuring Portugal's survival. This relationship gave Portugal international protection and kept Spain cautious. Economically, both countries had different focuses. Spain relied on American silver and gold, while Portugal built its fortune on trade through Africa, Asia, and Brazil. Their interests rarely collided in Europe, and their rivalries were mostly overseas. As their empires declined in the 19th century, both faced similar challenges, but did so as separate nations. The idea of Iberian unity faded completely in the modern age. By the 20th century, Portugal and Spain had entered parallel periods of dictatorship, followed by transitions to democracy. Instead of conflict, they developed cooperation. Today, the two countries share open borders and work side by side in the European Union, yet their distinct identities remain. The Portuguese see themselves as a maritime people tied to the Atlantic world, while Spain continues to be defined by its own regional diversity and Mediterranean influence. The reasons Portugal was never conquered by Spain are many. It gained independence early before Spain became a unified power. It secured powerful allies, especially England. Spain was often preoccupied with internal problems or global wars. Geography favored defense, and the Portuguese people valued their independence too deeply to surrender it. Each factor combined to make conquest nearly impossible. Over the centuries, even when Spain was at its height of power, it never managed to fully absorb its smaller neighbor. From the medieval victories of Afonso Henriques to the revolt of 1640, from the voyages of discovery to the resistance against Napoleon, the story of Portugal is one of resilience. Against great odds, it remained independent for nearly 9 centuries. It endured invasions, crises, and foreign rule, yet each time it reasserted its sovereignty. On the western edge of Europe, surrounded by mountains and facing the Atlantic, Portugal survived, beside a much larger neighbor, not through sheer strength but through diplomacy, unity, and determination. So, while the Iberian Peninsula has long been a land of shared history, the story of Portugal stands apart. It is the tale of a nation that refused to be swallowed by greater powers, that chose the sea over the sword, and that built its destiny through courage and endurance. And that is why Portugal remains independent to this day, a small yet steadfast nation whose identity could never be conquered.